name's Jim, and I am bipolar. This is the first episode of the Bipolar Podcast, where we take a glimpse into a bipolar life. In this podcast, you will be taken into my mind, someone who suffers from bipolar disorder each and every day. I got the idea to start a podcast because I needed an outlet. It's been over 10 years that I've been dealing with this disorder. I don't even want to call it a disorder. We're just going to call it what it is, bipolar. And I haven't really found a steady stream of outlets, if you will, to be able to get off my chest how I feel personally, because I can't really talk to other people about it. It's very difficult to talk to other people about this. I've done YouTube videos and I've enjoyed doing that. It was mostly gameplay YouTube videos, but I'd sit there and ramble. I like to get into a little bit of a character when I do record. I also do some streaming, and that is also another way I do a little bit of my outlet, but it's not really an open platform where I want to speak freely about something like this, something that's a little bit more personal. I feel the podcast scene is really the best place for this type of outlet. It's got the feel of you can talk about anything that you want, and the listeners are there to listen because they're interested in that specific topic. At the same time, they could also give their feedback, which is another plus. I'm interested in sharing my struggles, my life, and potentially helping another person maybe identify some issues that they're having, if they possibly think that they might be bipolar and have yet to be diagnosed, and maybe they're just trying to get an idea of how it feels and wants to kind of, if you will, swap stories. Maybe to find a support group. If I get feedback and there's people that are out there, I would want to reach out and say, hey, if you ever needed someone to talk about this and someone that will understand, I'd be there. I'm the type of person that likes to help others. And in this format, I guess I can help myself and others at the same time. Kind of a multi-benefit. So like I said, if you listen to the trailer, which is the first episode that you would see on iTunes and Google Plus and on my website as well at BipolarPod.space, I discussed that this podcast is pretty much just going to be basically my experiences. All the opinions that I will express here will be of my own and nobody else's. I really do appreciate you hitting that play button or downloading this podcast for the first time. And I do hope that you ride the journey with me and enjoy it. Hitting that subscribe button definitely helps out, and leaving your feedback in the comment section also helps. Thank you. So, get a little started. I'll let you in on a little bit about me. My name's Jim. I am a nerd/geek, depending on the day. I love electronics. I love computers. I build websites. I'm a techie at heart, through and through. I enjoy video games. I enjoy music. I enjoy YouTube. I am a father. I am divorced. And I'm 30. Well, soon to be. I was first diagnosed with bipolar disorder back in, I want to say, when I was 23. I can't put a year on that right now. And what led me to seek help to figure out what these feelings were that I was having, I pretty much went to a doctor because of mood swings. I was told that 1 second I could be fine, and the next second I was, rampant. I was, screaming, yelling. And for some reason I didn't understand, it couldn't happen. I don't remember that. I don't realize that I did that. And it worried me a lot. After I was told something like that, I didn't just shove it off. I held it in, because then I started paying attention to myself. I may not realize what I did right at that moment, but give it a few minutes after the fact, pretty much then I realized, oh my goodness, I just did that. Back in 2007, I was diagnosed with major depression. Then I was really going through a hard time. I was in my first relationship. I moved down there to be with her, and things just went south really fast. I want to say that probably was one of the major low points of my life. Right straight out of high school, and I moved away. And for a year, I kept myself there, and near the end of the year, I was experiencing a lot of ups and downs and depression. Went to a doctor. They diagnosed me with the major depression. They gave me Zoloft. That was the first medication that I had ever received for that type of thing. First time I ever had depression. At least been told that by a doctor. Things progressed a little bit after the coming weeks of being diagnosed with that. And then I started having these blackouts. And what I mean by blackouts, I'm talking about I was fully aware of everything going on. It was more so a feeling that you were all of a sudden just getting shivers and pins and needles all over your body. Then your vision would go black and white. Color would be completely gone. A sensation of coldness would rush over you and then cut to black. That's all I saw was black. Completely hearing everything happening around me, aware of what's going on, just not being able to see with that cold sensation. And it could last for a few seconds, up to 30 minutes. It got to the last straw when I was driving to work, and I had a blackout. And miraculously, I was able to pull the truck off the road and just barely hitting a telephone pole. Just barely. I could have hurt somebody. I could have hurt myself. At the same time, I didn't think that it would happen when I was driving. I went back to the doctor about it, and they referred me to go to a neurologist. I then got really depressed. I lost my job because of that. I lost my license for 6 months. I was in the lull of the lulls. Going forth from that, though, I did get myself out of it and progressed in my life. Through that time period, when I first started on the Zoloft, I had problems with it right off the bat. And it could have also not helped the situation any either. Being that every day I was in stress. Every day I was in fight or flight mode. And then depression was still there. At one point, I didn't feel that the medication was doing anything. And with that type of medication, you need to wean yourself off if you've been on a certain dose for so long. And I didn't do that, and I just stopped. And then at that point in time, maybe a couple days after doing so, I started to have suicidal thoughts. To the point where I attempted to enact on that thought. I went out, got in my truck, locked my doors, turned it on, put it in gear in reverse, and attempted to back out of the driveway with all intentions, if I got it out of the driveway, to go up a hill, down the road a little bit, where there was a train track that was below a mountain, and to just drive off right off the ledge. I never got my truck out of that driveway, backed it into a windmill, one of those little miniature ones, and got my truck stuck on it and couldn't go anywhere. At this point in time, people then started noticing something going on. I'm sitting there locked inside my truck, freaking out. That was my first time thinking about hurting myself. After that, I was put on Prozac, a really horrible drug, at least for me at that point. It pretty much made me like this. I had no feeling. I did not want to do anything. That was definitely one of the worst drugs I was put on. And then I just stopped taking them entirely. I weaned myself off and never went back to depressants again. So then comes, fast forward a little bit, I get married, really young age. I got married at 20. And then 2011 is when my son came. Sometime in between there, when I turned 23, is when I sought out to seek help for just these mood swings, trying to see what was causing them. Yeah, my life wasn't perfect. I had a lot of things going on, and it was rough. Stress was definitely apparent. High anxiety all the time. When I seen the psychiatrist and I explained to him the feelings that I was having, the rapid thoughts, like sometimes I just felt like I couldn't shut my mind off. I'd think about the past, I'd think about the present, I'd think about the future, all in a very short period of time. I'd get ideas, and then another one would come about, and then another one, and I just would get myself so fuzzled. I couldn't write them down fast enough. Then there was the sleepless nights because of my racing thoughts. The mood swings that I'm being told that I'm having and not realizing it. The voice getting extremely loud when I'm talking and again not realizing that I'm doing it. Like there's those feelings that just irked me. That's when I was diagnosed with bipolar. And I attempted my first set of medication. I do not remember offhand what my first dose was of medication, but I do know that I was on it for probably a good about 6 months. And I gradually got myself up to a mixture that felt okay. Racing thoughts slowed down. I started getting a little bit more of an up where I was happy and my ego was starting to rise. I would start a new job in that time period and get really excited for it, work really hard and learn as much as I can. It was pretty good for a while. And then it dropped. I immediately got depressed. I then started working less. I wouldn't put as much effort into what I was doing. And it would be such a drastic change that people would notice right away and ask if something was wrong. It was rough. And I was still on the medication. And at that point, the type of medication I was at the highest dose. Couldn't go any higher. So then it was time for a medication change. Right at that point when I got onto a new medication, which was, I think they had just came out, what was the medication? Latuda. I had started it, got myself up to a decent milligram level, and then lost my job, lost insurance. Latuda then became extremely costly, to the point where the moment the insurance was completely gone, They wanted $1,500 for me to get a refill. No way I was going to be able to afford that. And that was the first time I ended up just stopping my medication for bipolar with the Latuda. And it took a little bit longer for it to wear off. It was more so like a few weeks. I'd say maybe a week and a half before I started to get really, really bad racing thoughts constantly. I started sleeping during the day and staying up all night to the point where then I wouldn't be sleeping at all. I stopped talking to people. My girlfriend at the time, I ended up not wanting to be around her. We used to love to sit on the couch and watch TV, and to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. Even that simple, interaction, I couldn't face. I started crying a lot. It was just randomly. Tears would pour down my face at random moments. I'd be driving down the road, I'd cry. Be sitting, just listening to music, just start crying. Never really understanding what triggered it. Got to the point, though, that I felt I could not control my actions anymore. But I also could not call 911 for myself. I had an inability to do that. So I asked for help. I got resistance when I asked for help. I then thought the only way for me to truly get the help that I needed to threaten to kill myself. Grabbed a knife, threatened to kill myself. I got a call for 911. Cops were on their way. 402'd myself. Put myself into an institution for 6 days. Which at then that point, they put me on medication again. And made sure that I was up to a level that was decent before releasing me. This was lithium. It was okay for a while. And then I started to feel numb. I wanted to get back into some things that I enjoyed in the past because I needed a hobby. I couldn't do it. I didn't enjoy them anymore. It got to the point where I just was living life without really taking in what was going on around me. I'd wake up, I'd go to work, I'd come home, I'd eat, I'd go to bed. That was my purpose. I wasn't happy with that. I'm a creative person. I think of ideas and I enact on those ideas. Though being bipolar, this is a common trait where you start something and then you stop it. Either you return to it years later or you don't return to it at all. On my website, BipolarPod.space, on my blog, I have 2 blog posts that I started before I recorded this podcast. And one of them was about procrastination. This is a thing that I struggle with. Not just the procrastination, but the fact that I want to do something or I need to do something. And I know that either this needs to be done or I should probably do this right now. Then there's that moment where you go to do it. Let's say you get halfway through it and then all of a sudden you stop. It gets to the point where your body won't let you do anymore. Or your mind. You talk yourself into getting out of it. Talk to yourself in your head and say, hey, I don't really want to do this anymore. So just stop what you're doing. Let's change focus for a minute. Let's think about this and this. Ooh, and think about this. That's what happened to this podcast. I should have had this episode recorded days ago. I wanted to post the first episode today, which is Friday. And now it's looking like this episode's probably not going to get posted until early Saturday morning. But in that blog post about procrastination, I pretty much talk about how the perception of people who are bipolar or people that have bipolar disorder are lazy. That they are utilizing having a mental illness to not have to do anything, such as work. I struggle with holding a job down. I get really into a job in the beginning. I get really excited to start a new venture. I put my all in it. My 100% attention goes to the job. I'm excited. I'm earning a great pay. There's been many jobs where I was making a lot of money and it was sustainable. And I end up walking away from them, or I end up being told to leave. And it's usually attendance, unfortunately. But it's not that I want to do that. Every time that happens, I end up hurting myself more. So if I felt bad to begin with, I end up feeling like the shittiest person alive by the end. And I can't really explain what happens. All I know is that I get into this mode where I'm super excited. My ego is high. I can do it. I can do anything. I get into the job maybe 3 to 6 months into it, and I'm loving it. No issues. Then once I get into a lull, when I hit my low, I start getting depressed. I start realizing I'm depressed, and I start laying into it. All it takes is that first phone call into work to call off. From that moment forward, the pattern starts to build. My anxiety starts to eat at me. I don't want to say that I start getting paranoid, but I guess I do. You ever get that bug in your ear that says, I wonder what that person's thinking about right now? Are they staring at me? That I guess you would call paranoid. And then it would start making myself sick because I'm having such racing thoughts. It's always in my low points that racing and rapid thoughts just bother me to the root. I make myself sick with thoughts. It's odd to hear myself say that, but it's true. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. This is another reason why it's difficult to talk about it, because it to me, just sitting here listening to myself talk about it, it sounds ridiculous. But I, at that point, had no control, or I have no control when that happens. As much as I try to fight it, it's like I'm in my mind yelling at myself that's doing this, saying no. And mentally, my hands are being tied behind my back while that version of me takes over. I'm probably not making very much sense in this first episode. And I'll probably realize it after I've listened to it about 1,500 times. But it's like what I said in the beginning. I'm giving you a glimpse into my mind. This is how I think. It's rough to hear myself talk about these things. It's not easy, so I do end up stopping, and maybe I'm intentionally withholding some information and having difficulty being able to get back into the groove of telling the information, the story that I need to say. But I think that I've given you a point to maybe you can kind of understand where my background comes from with this disorder, this bipolar. I have a feeling that there's more to it. I think there's more to it than just being bipolar. I think I have some underlining things going on that are not diagnosed, and I'm working on that. In my trailer, I said I am currently not medicated. I'm still not medicated yet, but I am actively seeking help. I did have my first doctor's appointment earlier this week, and I did write a blog post about it on my website. I do want to take this time to mention that I do have my website that I'm using as like a journal. It's a blog. So for things that I may not talk about in the podcast, and I just randomly have the thought to talk about it, I'm going to write a blog post. And you can check that out at BipolarPod.space. I want to say thank you very much. If you've made it this far into the podcast, Thanks for sticking to it and listening to me just probably talk about a little bit of nonsense. It was really difficult, but I feel a little bit better about myself. And I think that the next episode is going to make things a lot easier. I hope you hit that subscribe button, and that way you can get notified when I have another podcast that just popped up. The current idea of a schedule would be once a week, with a new episode popped up on Friday. Hey, and if you do by chance suffer from bipolar, or you think you might, and you need someone to talk to, make a comment on my website. Let's have a conversation. If you want to talk in a private setting, we can talk on Twitter. I am making the Twitter for BipolarPod. It's going to be at BipolarPod. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to get some feedback. I'm Jim, and I am bipolar. See you next time.